The message arrived without warning, traveling through deep space and stopping every satellite it touched. For hours, every human communication system went silent. Then a single transmission appeared on the screen of Earth Space Command. It was not a threat. It was an invitation. A voice, calm and alien, spoke through the static. From the royal house of Velron, we invite the species known as humanity to attend the sacred bonding of our king's daughter, Princess Ilara, to the noble heir of the Trikar Dominion. No human had ever been invited to an alien royal event before. The message was beyond shocking. Some called it a trap. Others called it a miracle. Commander Ryan Hale, a decorated officer and one of Earth's few diplomats with field combat experience, was chosen to represent humanity. He didn't ask for it, but when the council called his name, he stood. He always did. 2 weeks later, his ship, the Aurora's Edge, emerged from hyperspace, gliding toward the crystal moon of Velron. It was like a dream. The moon shimmered like glass, wrapped in rivers of blue energy. Massive alien cities floated above silver clouds. Beams of light connected towers like threads in a cosmic web. As Ryan looked out the viewport, he whispered, "So this is how gods must live." The alien pilot beside him, a tall being with metallic skin, gave no answer. When the ship landed, an honor guard awaited, dozens of alien species, each more strange and beautiful than the last, some with wings of light, some with scaled faces, others wearing armor that moved like liquid metal. But as Ryan stepped out, silence fell. Every eye turned to the lone human. The whispers began almost instantly. Is that the human? They actually sent one. How primitive. Ryan heard them all, but he kept walking. He had stood before alien generals before. He had faced worse than stares. Still, he felt something cold in the air, something like fear or disgust. At the great palace gates, the king of Velron waited. He was enormous, his armor carved from crystal, his voice like thunder. "Welcome, human," the king said. "You stand on the soil of Velron, a world older than your sun. You come in peace?" Ryan bowed slightly. "In peace and respect, your majesty. I am honored to represent Earth." The king studied him carefully. His eyes were like burning stars. Then he nodded once. "We shall see if your kind understands honor." Inside the palace, Ryan saw wonders no human eye had seen. Floating gardens, beasts carved from light, musicians who played instruments made from sound itself. The air was sweet, heavy with unknown perfumes. At the center of the hall stood the princess, tall, graceful, with skin that shimmered faintly blue. Her eyes glowed like distant moons. When Ryan's gaze met hers, she smiled softly. It wasn't the cold smile of royalty, it was human. But before he could speak, the drums began to echo. The wedding ceremony was starting. The hall filled with 1,000 guests, ambassadors, lords, and warriors from across the galaxy. Ryan stood at the edge, silent, feeling very small among these giants of power. The priest raised his staff. The princess stepped forward beside her intended groom, a tall Trikar noble with skin like obsidian stone and golden eyes. Ryan watched with quiet awe. For a moment it seemed peaceful, beautiful. Then, everything changed. The groom took the ceremonial cup and raised it high. But before the liquid touched his lips, his hands began to tremble. His eyes widened. He dropped the cup. A strange smoke rose from it. He screamed. His skin turned pale silver. Then he fell, dead before he hit the floor. Chaos erupted. Guards surrounded the princess. The crowd screamed. The king roared, "Find the poisoner!" All eyes turned to the human. Ryan froze. The guards drew their plasma blades, surrounding him in seconds. He raised his hands. "Wait, I didn't." One of the nobles shouted, "The human!" He was near the cup. "I saw him." Ryan's heart pounded. He had never even moved close to it. But logic didn't matter. He was an outsider. A human among gods. "Take him," the king commanded. Before they could strike, a voice echoed through the chaos. "Stop!" The princess pushed through the guards, standing between Ryan and the blades. Her expression was fierce, her voice like fire. "He saved me," she said. The guards froze. Even the king hesitated. "Explain," he demanded. She pointed to Ryan. "The poison was meant for me. He saw it before anyone else. He warned me to stop." Ryan blinked. He hadn't realized what he'd done. His instincts had kicked in. When the groom had raised the cup, Ryan had whispered, "Wait. Something's wrong with the scent." That tiny warning had changed everything. Now the hall was silent. Every gaze shifted from the fallen noble to the lone human standing beside the princess. The king's expression darkened, filled with both suspicion and curiosity. Finally he spoke, his voice rumbling through the chamber. "Then the human shall live. For now." Ryan lowered his hands slowly, heart still pounding. He didn't know it yet, but this single act had already rewritten the fate of two civilizations, and somewhere deep within the royal court, unseen eyes watched with growing interest. The human had just stepped into the oldest game in the galaxy, the game of power, love, and betrayal. The throne room of Velron was silent. The body of the dead groom had been taken away, but his scream still echoed in everyone's mind. The celebration had turned into a courtroom. The king sat high upon his crystal throne. Around him, hundreds of alien nobles waited for his command. The air was heavy with fear and accusation. At the center stood the human, Commander Ryan Hale, surrounded by guards. His uniform was torn, his wrists bound with silver restraints that burned like fire. The king's eyes glowed like suns. "Human," the king said, voice echoing across the marble walls. "You were seen near the poisoned cup. Do you deny this crime?" Ryan stood tall, even in pain. "I deny it, Your Majesty. I didn't come here to harm anyone," the nobles hissed. Some laughed. One shouted, "All humans lie. He should be executed before the sun set." Another sneered, "He's too weak to kill even a fly." But the princess stepped forward, her face calm, her tone sharp. "I told you," she said. "He warned me before the poison reached the groom." "He saved my life," the court murmured. The king turned his gaze toward his daughter. "Ilara," he said slowly, "are you certain of this?" Her glowing eyes did not waver. "Yes, father. He acted before any of our guards did. That cannot be ignored." The king leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Then he shall face the trial of honor. If he survives, his name will be cleared. If not—" He paused, letting the silence bite. "Then justice will be done." Ryan frowned. "Trial of honor?" No one answered him. Two guards dragged him away through iron doors. The sound of the crowd's whispers followed him like shadows. The arena of the ancients hours later, Ryan stood inside a massive stone arena beneath the palace. The air was cold. The walls were carved with glowing alien runes. Above him, the king and princess sat in a high balcony surrounded by nobles. An alien announcer's voice boomed through the chamber. "By the law of Velron, the human will prove his honor through combat. If his heart is true, the stars will protect him. If it is false, he will perish." The gate opened. Out stepped a creature unlike any Ryan had ever seen. 10 feet tall, 4 arms, its skin made of molten metal. Its eyes burned orange. The crowd roared its name, Korak, the champion of Velron. Ryan whispered under his breath, "Great. I'm dead." The creature lunged. Ryan barely dodged the first swing. The ground cracked where the blow landed. He rolled, grabbed a broken spear from the arena floor and stood ready. The alien laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. "You fight with a stick, human?" Ryan gritted his teeth. "Sometimes a stick is enough." The fight began. Korak struck again and again, each hit like thunder. Ryan was fast, using his small size as an advantage. He ducked underarms, rolled between legs, and struck weak points. Sparks flew, but the alien's strength was beyond anything human. One hit sent Ryan crashing into the wall. His ribs screamed in pain. The crowd jeered. "End it," they shouted. Up on the balcony, the princess clenched her fists. "Stop this. He's not your enemy." The king remained silent. His eyes, however, watched closely, studying the human's will. Ryan coughed blood, his vision blurring. But as Korak charged again, something inside him ignited. A voice in his head whispered, "You're human. You don't quit." He stood, using the spear like a staff. When Korak swung, Ryan ducked, jammed the spear into the ground, and tripped the giant. The crowd gasped. The creature stumbled. Ryan leaped, grabbed a fallen chain, and wrapped it around the creature's neck. He pulled with every ounce of strength left. Korak roared, slamming him against the wall again and again, but Ryan refused to let go. "Yield," Ryan shouted. The arena trembled. Then finally, and the champion fell. The human stood over him, trembling but alive. For a moment there was silence, then applause. It started with the princess. Then others joined, some in disbelief, some in awe. The king rose slowly from his throne. His deep voice filled the chamber. "The trial of honor has been won." Ryan dropped the chain, panting, his body covered in blood and dust. The king continued. "By our law, the one who saves the royal blood must be rewarded. And by the same law," he turned toward the princess, "the one whose life was saved must be bound to their savior." The crowd gasped again. The princess's eyes widened. "Father, what are you saying?" "It is our oldest tradition," the king said. "If the human saved your life, then he is now your bonded protector, your chosen one." Ryan stared in disbelief. "Wait, what?" The king's voice grew heavier. "It means, human, that you will stand by her side. In our law, that bond can only be broken by death or marriage." The hall erupted into chaos. Some nobles shouted in anger. Others in shock. The princess looked at Ryan, really looked. There was fear, confusion, and something else. A strange spark neither of them could explain. Ryan didn't understand what was happening. But one thing was clear. He was now part of something far bigger than himself. Above them, the king's voice echoed like thunder one last time. "Let it be known across the stars, the human lives. And from this day forward, his fate is bound to the blood of Velron." The next sunrise over Velron burned gold and violet. Across the floating cities, bells rang in strange harmony. The announcement spread faster than light. The king had decreed a royal bonding between his daughter, Princess Alara, and the human who saved her life. Half the galaxy laughed. The other half watched in fear. In the palace, Ryan Hale stood before a mirror of living crystal. Alien attendants circled him, placing silver armor plates on his shoulders. The armor pulsed faintly, alive, reacting to his heartbeat. He still didn't understand what was happening. Yesterday he was an envoy. Today he was about to stand beside a princess in front of 1,000 alien lords. He whispered to himself, "This can't be real." A soft voice behind him answered, "It is human." The princess stepped into the chamber, her gown woven from light itself. She looked like the night sky had taken a human form. Ryan turned, unsure how to speak to her now. "Your Highness," she smiled faintly. "You can call me Alara. You're not my prisoner anymore." He gave a nervous half-smile. "Then what am I?" Her gaze lingered on him. "That, we shall both find out." The ceremony, the royal plaza shone brighter than a star. Holographic banners rippled in the air, each showing the crest of Velron, a blazing sun surrounded by wings. Thousands gathered. Some came to celebrate, some came to judge, and some came to kill. Ryan stood beside the princess beneath the glowing arch of unity. The king raised his staff, his deep voice echoing through the sky. "By law and by blood we unite two souls, one born of earth, one born of the star, so that peace may bridge our worlds." Cheers echoed, but Ryan noticed something strange. Among the crowd, several guards were not moving. Their armor shimmered oddly, almost flickering. Their eyes glowed the wrong color, red instead of blue. Instinct screamed danger. He whispered to Alara, "Something's wrong." Before she could answer, the first explosion hit. A blinding wave of light ripped through the plaza. The stage shattered. People screamed. From the smoke, armored assassins emerged, firing plasma bolts at the royal guards. The king's personal guards formed a wall around him, but it was too late. Dozens of traitors were already inside. Ryan grabbed Alara's arm and pulled her down behind the broken stage as blasts scorched the air above them. "Who are they?" he shouted. "The Crimson Order," she gasped. "Royal traitors. They want my father dead." Ryan peeked through the smoke. He saw one of the false guards raise his weapon toward the king. Without thinking, Ryan ran straight into the open. "Ryan, no!" Alara screamed. He sprinted through the chaos, grabbing a fallen spear from the ground. The assassin fired. Ryan rolled, the blast grazing his arm, and hurled the spear with everything he had. It struck the attacker square in the chest. The alien dropped instantly. The king turned, eyes wide. For a moment, shock replaced the fury. The human had just saved his life again. The battle turns, but there were too many enemies. More assassins dropped from the rooftops surrounding the plaza. One of them shouted, "Kill the royal line! Leave no blood unspilled!" Ryan ducked behind a pillar as the ground shook with explosions. He spotted a control panel nearby, part of the city's defense grid. Its interface was alien, but he could still read patterns. "Old military code," he muttered. "Same logic, different symbols." He tapped the panel, rerouting power to the shields. Energy barriers erupted around the surviving civilians. Ilara watched from behind the broken throne, astonished. "How do you know our systems?" Ryan smiled tightly. "We may be new to your galaxy, but humans learn fast." He drew a fallen blaster and fired back at the traitors. His shots were quick, precise, and brutal, pure soldier's instinct. The princess rose beside him, her hands glowing with royal energy. She released waves of blue light that disarmed attackers instantly. Together they fought, human steel and alien magic side by side. When the last of the assassins fell, the plaza was in ruins. Smoke filled the air. The twin suns burned above like silent witnesses. The king's decision royal medics rushed to the wounded. The king himself was injured, a deep burn across his chest, yet he stood tall, gripping his staff. He looked at Ryan, breathing hard. "You have twice saved my blood. And my throne." Ryan shook his head. "I didn't do it for your throne, your majesty. I did it for her." The king's gaze shifted between them, the human covered in dust and his daughter standing beside him with quiet pride. For a long moment no one spoke. Then the king raised his hand for silence. "Hear me, people of Velron. The wedding shall continue. The galaxy will know that even in blood and fire our bond stands strong." The crowd roared, some in loyalty, others in fury. But none dared oppose the king's voice. He turned to Ryan. "You are no longer an envoy. From this moment you are bound to this house, as husband to my daughter and defender of my throne." Ryan froze. His mind spun. Marriage? In front of all these beings? Ilara's eyes widened. "Father," but the king raised his staff again. "It is done." The bells rang once more, louder than before. Ryan felt the weight of 100 alien gazes upon him. He had come as a guest, fought as a soldier, and now stood as a king's son-in-law. Far above, unseen ships drifted in the void, enemy fleets watching, waiting. And deep in the crowd, a cloaked figure whispered into a communicator. "The human lives. Proceed with Phase 2. Night fell over the capital of Velron like a dark ocean. The palace lights burned through the mist, casting golden beams across the floating gardens. But behind the beauty, something ugly moved. Whispers, shadows, betrayal. Hours after the wedding, the palace should have been celebrating. Instead, the halls were full of soldiers. The wounded were being carried away, and the royal banners still hung torn from the earlier attack. Commander Ryan Hale stood on the balcony outside the royal chamber, his new armor scarred and burned. He looked down at the ruined courtyard, smoke still rising from the fires. The princess joined him, silent. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. "They'll come again," Ryan said quietly. Ilara nodded. "They won't stop until my father is dead, or until the throne is taken." Ryan turned to her. "Then we don't wait for them." The hidden thread inside the palace war room, holographic maps floated in the air. The king's generals argued loudly. "The traitors have taken the southern gates." One shouted, "They're calling for reinforcements from the outer colonies." Another slammed his fist on the table. "We should flee to the capital moon." The king raised his hand. The room went silent. "We do not run," he said, voice heavy with exhaustion and pride. "Velron stands or falls tonight." Ryan stepped forward. "Then we fight smart. Not like an empire, but like humans do." The generals frowned. "And how do humans fight, off-worlder?" Ryan smiled grimly. "When the walls fall, we use what's left to crush the enemy." He began outlining a plan, short, brutal, and efficient. Block the palace corridors. Turn the art chambers into choke points. Activate the old mining drones hidden under the floors as traps. Use the defense turrets manually instead of relying on the AI, which might be hacked. The king studied him for a long time. Then he nodded. "Do it." The siege begins minutes later. Alarms screamed across the palace. Red lights flashed. The outer gates exploded inward as the Crimson Order stormed in. Hundreds of armored soldiers bearing the traitor symbol. A red sun split in half. Ryan stood with a small group of loyal guards at the top of the grand stairway. "Hold the line," he ordered. "No one passes these doors." The first wave came like a storm. Ryan's blaster fired in sharp bursts. Alien blood hissed on the marble floor. A drone rolled out from behind him and detonated under the attackers, sending them flying. The aliens had never seen human battle style before. It wasn't elegant. It was survival. It was chaos turned into precision. Ilara fought beside him, her eyes glowing with royal energy. Each gesture sent waves of blue fire that shattered enemy shields. When one of the traitors tried to flank her, Ryan stepped in front and blocked the strike with his arm, the blade cutting deep. He didn't even scream. He just pushed back harder. "Why do you do this, human?" The traitor gasped. Ryan's voice was cold. "Because we protect what's ours." The betrayal revealed hours past. The palace shook from explosions. Finally, the attackers pulled back. For a moment, it was quiet. Ryan leaned against a wall, breathing heavily. But then, he heard something strange. A hum, deep and steady, coming from beneath the throne chamber. He followed the sound through hidden doors and down a spiral corridor of crystal. At the end, he found something that froze his blood. A secret hangar. Ships ready for escape, and in the center, one of the king's own generals speaking to a hologram of a cloaked figure. "The plan proceeds," the general said. "The king will die tonight. The human will take the blame. The throne will fall to us." Ryan stepped from the shadows. Wrong, the traitor spun, shocked. Ryan fired first. The blast hit the control panel, and the hangar erupted in sparks. The hologram vanished. The general drew his sword. "You can't stop this," the alien hissed. "The galaxy will never kneel to your kind." Ryan raised his weapon. "Then we'll make them stand beside us instead." The fight was quick and merciless. When it ended, the general lay still and the alarms were blaring again. Ryan staggered back to the throne room, arm bleeding, uniform shredded. "Ilara!" he shouted. She turned, and behind her the ceiling cracked. A massive blast shook the palace. From above, enemy dropships pierced the roof and released waves of drones. The final assault had begun. The human's fury, Ryan stood in the center of the chaos, eyes burning with determination. He turned to Ilara. "Get your father to the lower vaults." "What about you?" she cried. He smiled faintly. "I'll buy you time." She hesitated, then pressed something into his hand, a royal sigil glowing with power. "If you survive, this will mark you as one of us." He closed his fingers around it. "I don't need a mark. I just need a target." Then he charged. He ran straight into the drones, using one fallen blaster in each hand. Plasma streaked the air. The sound was deafening. He jumped, rolled, and shot with inhuman precision. His fury was terrifying. Not alien, not divine, human. From the balcony, the princess watched in awe. For the first time, she understood why the galaxy feared Earth soldiers. They weren't made for conquest. They were made for survival. When the smoke cleared, the palace floor was littered with shattered metal and fallen armor. Ryan stood alone, breathing hard, still alive. But as he turned, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The king's throne was empty. The royal guards were dead, and on the wall, burned in red plasma, were the words, "The new order rises tonight." The palace was in ruins. Smoke coiled around broken towers, and the air smelled of ash and betrayal. Where once stood golden halls of celebration, now only silence remained. Commander Ryan Hale limped through the shattered throne corridor. His armor was cracked, his face streaked with soot and blood. Every breath burned his lungs, but he kept moving. Somewhere ahead, he could still hear faint voices. Soldiers, the princess, the wounded king. He pushed through fallen pillars and stepped into the royal chamber. The king lay slumped against his throne. The royal crest burned into his chestplate. Ilara knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Father," she cried, gripping his hand. "Please stay with me." The old monarch opened his eyes, barely breathing. His gaze turned toward Ryan, and for the first time there was no pride, no command, only trust. "You fought like no other," the king whispered. "You saved her. You saved us all." Ryan knelt beside him. "Save your strength, your majesty. We can still—" The king raised a trembling hand. "No, human. My time is finished. But yours is just beginning." He removed the glowing royal seal from his chest and pressed it into Ryan's palm. "With this you command the throne. You are now guardian of Velron, and of my daughter." Ryan shook his head. "I can't take this." "You already have," the king said weakly, a faint smile on his lips. "Our law binds the savior to the bloodline. The galaxy will need someone who fights not for power, but for people." Then the king's hand fell still. Ilara's cry broke the silence. The rise of the human hours later, the fires were out. The surviving guards gathered in the courtyard. The dawn light touched the ruins, painting the broken palace in gold and blue. Alara stood before her people, the royal crown in her hands. Beside her stood Ryan, wounded, silent, still holding the king's seal. The air was heavy with uncertainty. Then Alara spoke, her voice trembling but strong. "My father is gone. The Crimson Order has fallen. But one truth remains: we live because of him." She turned toward Ryan. "This human who came as a stranger fought for us when no one else did. He bled for Velron. He defended a people that were not his own. He is what we call a true king, not by birth but by heart." The crowd murmured, voices whispering across the plaza. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others simply stared in disbelief. Alara held up the seal. "By the right of my father's last command and by the law of the bond, I declare Ryan Hale of Earth as co-sovereign of Velron." The crowd gasped. Ryan took a slow breath. "I didn't come here for a crown." Alara smiled sadly. "That's why you deserve it." She placed the crown's crystal half upon his shoulder. Light spilled from it, spreading through the air, a symbol of unity glowing brighter than the rising suns. The shadows gather, but peace did not last, even as the people cheered. Far above the planet, silent fleets moved among the stars, the same fleets that had funded the Crimson Order. Their admirals watched from orbit, anger burning behind alien eyes. "The human sits on a throne now," one hissed. Another replied, "Then we will burn that throne to dust." Across a dozen systems, orders were given. Warships turned toward Velron. The first strike back on the surface, alarms began to wail again. Ryan looked up at the sky and saw fire. Dozens of ships broke through the atmosphere, their plasma cannons glowing red. The palace shields were down, the defenses crippled. Ryan turned to Alara. "Get to the vaults, now." She shook her head. "Not without you." He smiled faintly. "Stubborn. You really are royal." He ran to the command tower, hands flying over alien consoles. He patched into every system still alive. The screens flickered, old Terran code appearing beside alien symbols. He was merging them. Come on," he muttered. Then, power surged. Above the city, human warships emerged from hyperspace, massive, dark, and silent. The Terran defense fleet had arrived. The leading ship, TNS Resolute, sent a message through the static. "Commander Hale, this is Admiral Rourke. Heard you started a wedding without us." Ryan laughed through exhaustion. "You're late." "Then let's make an entrance," the Admiral replied. The battle for the throne, the sky became fire. Terran and alien ships fought above the moon, their beams lighting the clouds like lightning storms. From the palace balcony, Alara watched in awe as Earth's warships unleashed their fury, precise, unstoppable, terrifying. The invaders tried to flee, but the humans hunted them down one by one. On the ground, Ryan led the defense teams, commanding both human soldiers and Velron warriors together. For the first time in history, humans and aliens fought as one. Hours later, when the last enemy ship fell, silence returned. The dawn of a new empire. The galaxy would remember that day. The day when a human became a king among the stars. In the royal courtyard, Ryan stood beside Alara as the banners of both Earth and Velron waved together in the wind. He looked at her and said quietly, "I was just supposed to be a guest at your wedding." She smiled softly. "You still are. You just never left." He turned toward the horizon where Terran ships floated like steel angels above the dawn. "The galaxy thought humanity was small," he said. "Now they'll remember we don't bow. We rise." Alara slipped her hand into his. "Then let them see what happens when Earth and Velron stand together." The stars glowed brighter, not in fear, but in respect. Because that night, a legend was born. The human king of Velron, the man who turned an alien world into humanity's greatest ally. And somewhere, beyond the dark edge of the galaxy, those who had once mocked humanity began to whisper a new warning. Never underestimate Earth. The last time someone did, they lost a kingdom.